Well, hello, my badass friends. My name is Cece, and this is my badass life. This one today is for my fellow LARSians, those of us with a semicolon who experience continued gastrointestinal issues and frequency, urgency, clustering, all of those things that go along with having lower anterior resection syndrome as a result of colorectal cancer treatment and or surgery. And so this is just a little bit about what I'm doing these days to make it a little bit easier to travel. So as you know, I'm in Mexico, and we did come to Mexico last year, and it was a little more challenging, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. But last year's trip was more challenging because I was still operating like a normal person would, in terms of my bathrooming habits. In other words, I was going to the bathroom normally, and but we know as LARSians it's never normal. So some of the things that I had to do while I was here was, when I traveled, I could not eat or drink anything, regardless of how long the flight was, regardless of how long the travel day was. So I would basically eat the night before travel, and then I would go however long it took, not eating or drinking anything, like 24 hours, to prevent myself from having to go to the bathroom. Because one of the symptoms of LARS, if you're not a LARSian listening to this, is clustering, which means sometimes you can go to the bathroom anywhere from 3 to 20 plus times a day, depending on the day and depending on the foods that you have, and you never know what's going to disagree with you. So it's very much an unpredictable bathrooming situation. You also don't know when you're going to have diarrhea versus regular stools. You don't know when you're going to be constipated, and sometimes you go through a phase of constipation and then it's diarrhea, so it can be very confusing. People a lot of times with ulcerative colitis and IBS also have some similar symptoms to what we have with LARS, but ours are typically caused because after surgery, most of us don't have some very important parts in our bodies that all you normies have, which means I am missing all of my sigmoid colon, which, if you don't know this, is your poop storage. And I'm missing all but a tiny little bit of my rectum, which also is your poop storage, because your rectum is actually a good size when you have your whole rectum. So I basically have a 1-inch wonder of a rectum and nothing else. And also, normies have that, normal people have that right angle in their colon. And on the left side of your body, you've got a right angle where your colon comes down and makes a right angle and then goes down into your for the output. In my case, I no longer have that right angle, so mine just goes whoop straight down, just like a poop chute. Yep. Amy calls it a pinball machine. Anyway, that aside. So last year, being here in Mexico was a lot tougher. There are not, the public restrooms are not as widely available in Mexico, and not all restaurants have bathrooms. Not all stores have bathrooms like they do in the US. So it's a very different environment here. And the public restrooms, you often have to pay to get in, but that's okay, because it also keeps them cleaner, and there are usually attendants there that, hand out towels to you and things like that. It's a much longer story, but I had to be a lot more prepared last year. So traveling, no food, no water. Now, I did finally learn the trick that if you take hard candy with you, you can suck on hard candy, it stops the hunger pangs, and it doesn't trigger a go. So if you are still traveling that way and doing the fasting while you're traveling, take the hard candy with you. My favorite are Lifesavers butter rum. Awesome. And I still carry those with me because I still don't eat a ton traveling, but I'm gonna get to that in a minute, what I'm doing differently. So last year, if we ate out at a restaurant, I would almost always expect to have a backlash the next day. And sometimes I would have to prepare if there was a backlash during the meal, which meant that I would only eat out at restaurants that had a bathroom within 5 minutes. And some of us, some LARSians wouldn't even have the 5 minutes. It would have to be right there. So it did make it more challenging. I always traveled with my go bag, which was my potty bag with all my hand sanitizer and my butt wipes and all of the things. And actually I still do, because I still don't always know when things are coming. But I have started doing a couple of things differently this year. So last year was much more challenging in Mexico. What did I do differently this year? So a few months back, actually it's probably been close to 6 months now, I finally got to a point, and so, here's the other thing. Last year in Mexico, my bowels actually became more regulated than they were at home, which was a completely baffling scenario. By the time we left Mexico, my bowels were slightly more regulated. I was still clustering, but instead of clustering maybe 8 to 10 times a day, it was maybe only 4 or 5 times a day. Things had become more predictable. Diet, who knows what the difference was. But then I got home and everything went out of whack. And this is also what happens with LARS sometimes, is you never know, one little thing, you'll be totally dialed in for a while, a couple months, and then all of a sudden something will throw your system out of whack, and you will be out of whack for months until you get it figured out again. It's a typical Larsian thing, and I don't know why. I don't know what causes it. Also, Larsians suffer from a lot of gastrointestinal bloating and discomfort, and there's a lot of flatulence, which, without those other parts, you can't always hold in unless you've had some really good pelvic floor physical therapy like I did, but even then, sometimes really hard. Although most of my friends in their 50s are now telling me that they have the same problem with holding in their flatulence and their poo, so I don't feel so bad, and they haven't had surgery. So anyway, where was I going with that? So all of a sudden I before we left Mexico, I was kind of dialed in. I was like, oh my God, this is fabulous. Like there's some regularity to things and some predictability. And then all of a sudden I got home and something upset the apple cart. So I don't know what it was, but I actually at one point thought that I had gotten a bug, like a gut bug or, some kind of parasite in Mexico. Not the case because I got tested for everything. But for, I don't know, 3-4 months or so, I was a mess. 5 months, 6 months, I don't know. I was a mess. And so it just got overwhelming. So I belong to a Facebook group for lower anterior resection syndrome, and there are 7,000 people in that group. So now, here's the interesting thing about LARS. It's incredibly under-researched. It's incredibly understudied. Nobody has a lane for LARS, and a lot of times doctors don't even talk about it. They don't talk about it before surgery. They don't talk about it after surgery. Sometimes after surgery, if you have it, they'll gaslight you into believing that you don't have it. I have friends that that's happened to, and that's really scary. But nobody really wants to talk about it. And even when you bring it up, sometimes doctors and your team, they don't really want to discuss it. Either A, because they really aren't experts in it and they like to be experts in the things they talk about, or B, maybe because they feel bad that it happened as a result of your treatment. But quite frankly, I'm here, I'm alive. I don't have an ostomy, and it's yes. Does it affect my quality of life? Absolutely, 100%. Negatively, yes, absolutely, 100%. But I'm here, and I know lots of people with ostomies who are happy to be here with their ostomy. I know lots of people with LARS who are happy to be here with LARS. We're just happy to be here. We're just happy to be alive. Does it suck? Sure, totally sucks. And do I wish it wasn't the case? Yeah, but I'm here. I'm alive. So I'm figuring out my way through it. So after several months of misery, somebody in my LARS group, several people in my LARS group actually, again, a group of 7,000 people. So believe me, people get LARS after colorectal cancer treatment. Somebody said I need to try TAI. And so TAI stands for transanal irrigation. Basically what it is it's an enema. So oftentimes people with LARS will resort to TAI or enemas to be able to start to help regulate their bathrooming habits so that they can have greater quality of life. Well, I resisted it for a really long time. 1, I didn't want the hassle. 2, and here's the really big one, I felt like I'd be giving up on my body because, I did a 1.5 years of physical therapy so that I could still, hold in my poo and all the things and, the Kegel exercises, and I want to be a tough cancer survivor, right? And so I felt like if I said yes to TAI, I would be giving up on my body. But at one point I hit a misery level of, really, prior to this, I couldn't leave the house before noon because I'd probably go to the bathroom 3 or 4 times before noon. And the only way that I could leave the house before noon is if I starved myself, which is totally not healthy for anybody, let alone a cancer survivor. So I started doing TAI. I finally gave in and said, fuck it, I'm going to do the TAI. I'm going to do the enema. And it takes a while to dial in. I'm not going to lie, because everybody uses a different amount of water. Everybody does it a little differently. There are different setups, there are different things. And then it's so funny because they tell you you should not do TAI without the advice of your physician. And in reality, none of my physicians had ever mentioned TAI to me, even as an option before. So literally, I'm the one going, hey, after I started it, of course, after I went down the path and started it, I'm like, hey, I'm doing TAI, is that okay? And most of them are like, yep, that's cool, go for it. But it wasn't like they brought it to my attention as an option. So bottom line is, I started doing TAI. It took a while to dial in. Was it frustrating at first? Absolutely. But I finally started getting it dialed in and I figured it out. And I am now at a place where some people do it every day. Some people do it lying down. Some people do it sitting on the toilet. Some people do it every other day. So I'm just going to share with you because I'm all about the TMI, right? And this is good for those of you who are not colorectal cancer survivors, but have colorectal cancer survivors in your life. You should listen to this because it's super important, right? Because it's allowed me greater quality of life. And believe me, this year in Mexico has been so much easier because of TAI. So I now do TAI every other day. And basically it cleans me out. And I know that at least one day out of two, I'm gonna be good to go. Now, there's a couple of caveats. So one is, I still have to be very careful about the foods that I eat, and especially restaurant food, because even if I've done TAI on a day or even the next day when I'm essentially empty, because I'm doing it every other day, I could have a backlash from a restaurant meal. So for instance, I could do TAI today and be great all day, and then tonight have a meal, and by tomorrow I could have diarrhea, which seems crazy if you think you're empty, but sometimes that happens. So that piece is still unpredictable, but it doesn't happen all the time. And it happens way less if I don't eat restaurant food. And now I also know which, at least here where we're at, I'm starting to figure out which restaurant foods are safe for me to eat, because all of us have safe foods that we can eat. And I also know how to prophylax. I go on the toddler diet for a couple of days, the bread, white rice, those kind of things, cheese, things that slow the roll. And that'll help me out. I can't find my favorite goldfish here, which usually are my prophylax. So here I do animal crackers, regular crackers, pretzels. There aren't a lot of choices for snacks here. So that being said, and then sometimes, only sometimes I will do TAI in the morning, and within a 3-hour period, I'm going to have one more go because somehow the water must get stuck up there. So what TAI does is it only empties what's in your lower colon. Okay, so your small intestine above your lower colon doesn't empty. So whatever's in there and working on breaking down your food and trying to produce poop is still there, but you're emptying what's in your lower colon. And so this does a couple of things too. It helps prevent constipation, right? It helps promote regularity. Even though I'm not going to the bathroom normally, it still helps promote regularity. And believe it or not, it actually helps your microbiome. I did the homework on this. It actually can improve your microbiome, because if you're somebody who's holding poo all the time and constipated, then that actually is super bad for your system and can add toxins to your system and your microbiome that aren't good for you. And it also helps to kind of alleviate some of that diarrhea. So anyway, back to my point. On a day that I do TAI, within a 3-hour window, it is sometimes possible that I will have one more go that is more diarrhea-like, because I think some water gets stuck up there sometimes, and sometimes I don't move enough to get it all out, because there is a little bit of, movement that you kind of have to do to get everything out. And it's process, okay? So it takes me anywhere from 45, and maybe takes me anywhere, now that I've gotten the hang of it, it takes me anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to do TAI, and that includes preparation of the water and the cleanup and all the things. But I'm getting it more dialed in, so I'd say the average is more around 45 minutes. Now, compare that to how much time I was in the bathroom prior to this and how much time I was in the bathroom intermittently, not knowing when I was gonna have to go, but basically anytime I ate something, I'd have to find a bathroom. I was probably in the bathroom for at least an hour and a half a day intermittently prior to TAI. So when you compare it, 45 minutes, yes, it's still a pain in the ass, excuse the pun, still a pain in the ass. And there are some days I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do it today. But but it's still better than what it was. And so, so sometimes on that first day, I might have one more go, but usually after I have that second one, I know I'm good for at least another, day before I have to do it again. So it's worked for me. And in terms of traveling, what it allowed me to do this year was it allowed me to have at least water while we were traveling, which I wasn't doing before. And I was able to eat a small amount of food, still a little paranoid. I was still a little paranoid about eating a lot of food, like real food while I was traveling, but it did allow me to at least eat a handful of crackers here or something so that my belly was getting a little bit of nutrition and hydration, because certainly traveling dehydrates you anyway. So it did allow me to do that traveling, so I didn't have to completely starve myself. So all that being said, I'm not telling you have to do TAI. I'm not saying that at all, because it was a really, really hard decision for me. And of course, in my mind, sometimes I think, what if I can never poop normally again after doing this? But they say that doesn't happen, so I'm going to go with that. And sometimes I think, God, whatever happens if for some reason I'm without my TAI kit, or, I can't do the TAI when I need to do the TAI. I get a little freaked out about that sometimes, because that's just where my head goes. It's like, what if I don't have the ability to do TAI, or I lose my kit, or I don't know, the crazy thoughts, right? And I think, nope, I'm just gonna have to cross that bridge when I come to it, because right now it's working. And right now it's giving me peace of mind. Right now it's giving me better quality of life. And right now it's giving me more predictability. I can go out and run now 2 to 3 miles without having to worry about having to find a bathroom in between my run, which is like a freaking miracle, right? Otherwise, I would have to starve myself and go run, which doesn't give me the energy to run. So that is counterproductive to health, right? Starving yourself, counterproductive to good health. I didn't like doing it, but it was a necessity. And now I don't have to do that. So I feel like in the last 6 months or so, my life, in terms of quality of life, has gotten back to a more normal situation when it comes to bathrooming. It'll never be normal. It'll never be like you folks who have your whole colon and all the things. But it's a better normal than it was a year ago. And that's worth something. So TMI for you today on TAI. Have a great day. Love ya.